For more on what's happening in Hong Kong, I'm joined by Einar Tangen from Beijing. He's CGTN's current affairs commentator. Einar, how did the violence change the dynamic in these ongoing protests, in your opinion?
Well, Roee, I mean, what you have here is the ugliest face of radical politics. I mean, can you imagine something like this happening in the United States Congress or in the House of Parliament? And it's very, very disturbing. I think people finally realize that, you know, there are many divided societies. You have, you know, the Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. You have Brexit in Britain. The idea that it's okay to kind of rationalize this violence and is ridiculous. So at this point, people are, I think, hopefully reassessing exactly what this movement is about.
How would you rate Carrie Lam's handling of the current situation over the last 48 hours?
Well, it's interesting. On one hand, it's hard to believe that she basically just withdrew the police and let them do that. On the other hand, without that, if there had been a confrontation between police and demonstrators, the headlines, especially in the Western media, would have been police brutality, you know, knocking down these innocent protesters and things like that. But by showing exactly what these splinter group of young people are willing to do in order to further not the rule of law, but the rule of the mob, I think it's a kind of yin and yang. It's good that it was exposed. It's not good that a institution such as Hong Kong's Legislative Council room was destroyed.
Do you think Beijing feels that Lam and Hong Kong officials are capably handling the situation?
Well, I think Beijing is in a difficult situation. They don't want to accede to the demands of the mob and remove Carrie Lam, so they are putting their weight behind her. On the other hand, I'm sure that there are questions about exactly how this kind of came about. Carrie Lam, I think, was the one who, on her own, decided that this was the appropriate time to push this particular issue. It wasn't, I don't think, at the behest of Beijing, and now Beijing finds itself in the hot seat as it kind of tries to respond to an issue which it was allowing her to handle by herself.
She admitted that she wasn't expecting this sort of public resistance, and now we've seen the protests or break-off protests turn quite violent. But where do all of the sides go from here? I guess, how does all of this end?
Well, I mean, hopefully rationality takes the front seat in the driver's position, and people start backing off and rethinking whether or not they think they want a mob rule like this, or whether they prefer to go back to the norms that they already had. Obviously emotions are running high, but you have to start questioning where those emotions are coming from. You'll note that in many of these protests or mob actions, as you prefer to call them, it's very organized. All the signs are the same. They're freshly printed. There seems to be this call from the international press that there are no leaders behind this, but it seems that it's pretty well organized and funded. Now the question is, why are these young people protesting against an extradition treaty which would rarely have anything to do with them? The people who would have the most concerns about this are the very wealthy people in Hong Kong who have in essence used these young people as pawns to protect their interests, not the interests of these young people. Remember, the wealthy can move from Hong Kong. These young people will not have those kinds of options.
Einar, thanks as always for your insight.